What's up guys, Houndish here, and today we're going to jump in and talk about what we know regarding the end of season event for season 11, the Evacuation exotic quest, extra rewards that we'll pick up along the way, and some pretty big character developments moving into year 4. Of course, in addition, we will be picking up the Traveler's Chosen exotic sidearm coming in a few weeks' time, so we'll cover everything that we currently know about what is going to be the next major beat of this season, and of course that includes spoilers, so beware of that as always with this kind of video. But first, the upcoming Evacuation quest is going to be a pretty significant part in the story of the Pyramid Arrival, most obviously because it's the next exotic quest that we know of, and also because it will be the official beginning of the end for those destinations going away at the end of the year. However, of course it has wider implications right now, and for what we might see this season, because it's also listed as an end of season event, with critical character changes on the way. As with the evac prep quest, the evacuation phase itself will begin with Zavala, so he's going to call us over, and he does say that Sloane has asked whether we could spare a Vanguard ship to relocate important cargo. Head to Titan, help her tie up loose ends, and bring her home. And of course the preparations for this evacuation are now visible in game, so you may have noticed various cargo stashes around the vendors in locations that'll be going away. And during the evacuation, we'll be helping to salvage all of this cargo and save as much as possible from the destinations. But what about the actual quest steps that lead us to the end of the season? And we should say that the Traveler's Chosen ornament is currently listed in the Eververse schedule for September the 8th, so typically when we see that, it is the launch date for the exotic quest associated with that reward itself. That will quite likely be the case this time, but of course we don't have an official start date for the quest just yet. It just seems most likely that by September 8th, it will have been acquired. Of course, in the evac quest there are a lot of steps, so throughout we do get some additional rewards in the form of Nightfall unique weapons. And for the moment, presumably, this isn't going to be a time-gated quest because, well, it's an evacuation. It sounds like a bad idea to time-gate one, but the first destination will be Io, so we go and speak to Asher, and he'll ask us to collect a sample from a taken phalanx in the Lost Sector Sanctum of Bones. We'll also need to open the chest in that Lost Sector and collect traces of corruption by defeating Taken on Io. Once this is done, we'll need to head into the Pyramidian Strike and collect scan traces by defeating Vex anywhere on Io. And then a requirement to complete the adventure Unexpected Guests on Heroic Mode, before finally returning to Asher with our findings. And so there's something pretty similar for each of the destinations, but after each location phase, there'll be a dialogue with the vendors. And this gives us a bit of insight into their future, but for each location evacuated, we'll also receive a Nightfall exclusive weapon drop. So when we go back to Asher, he'll reward us with the Silicon Neuroma. Still a weapon that's going to be sunset next season, but if it's one you never managed to pick up from the Nightfall itself, it's a good opportunity to collect it. But we can also see from the text there that it appears Asher is going to stick around on Io and fight it out with the darkness on the shores of the Radiolarian Lake and the Pyramidian. And so I guess his fate may be a slight mystery, and so it will be interesting to learn of Asher's fate following the evacuation. But immediately afterward, we'll need to head to Titan and speak to Sloane. And kind of like on Io, there'll be a high value target in the Lost Sector Methane Flush. We'll need to destroy the target, as well as opening the chest in the Lost Sector. And I would assume that these targets are probably going to be highlighted, or pretty obvious inside of the Lost Sectors. But then there'll be a step to open chests protected by Hive Ultras in the Solarium and Festering Halls to claim their Golden Age tech. Of course, that's the area near to the Savathun Songstrike. And then we'll need to complete the Savathun Songstrike itself, and defeat Hive Ogres, Wizards, and Knights to collect tech fragments. Which once we have enough of, we can return to Sloane, and she will actually award us the duty-bound auto rifle for this step. And we can see that Sloane has some dialogue about Savathun right there. And Sloane vows to continue the fight against the darkness, but we're not sure if or when we could possibly see Sloane again after this phase. But it will be time to head to Mercury after that, and we need to complete the Garden World Strike initially, while defeating Hydras, Minotaurs, and Cyclopses on Mercury to collect timeline fragments. Then we'll also need to complete the Strike Tree of Probabilities, and defeat Cabal on Mercury to collect traces of Osiris, and then finally, the Bug in the System Heroic Adventure. And when we return to Vance, he will drop the DFA hand cannon, and also essentially from his dialogue, it appears that he's going to go off into the Infinite Forest. I'm not sure whether to escape or to find answers, but maybe we'll find out down the road. And then we get to the really interesting phase, Mars, where the location and characters are probably going to have the most influence overall. So after speaking to Anna Bray, we'll need to investigate a signal coming from Rasputin inside of the Mind Lab on Mars. This is an area that players have noticed a hidden objective in since the start of this season. It seems to just be showing up a little bit early without the quest actually being in the inventory. once we've visited this location, we'll need to defeat bosses in Escalation Protocol to collect pieces of Rasputin's shattered frame. And of course that's a pretty interesting one in itself, but also there's a requirement to complete the adventure Deathly Tremors before returning to Anna Bray. She will drop the Braytech Osprey after completing this step, but we can see from the dialogue that she's playing around with some tech and a soldering iron upon our arrival, and finishes by saying, "Let Zavala know that I'll bring Rasputin to the tower, and whatever happens next, we'll face it together." And so initially, she stated that she will be going to the tower herself, but also that she's going to bring Rasputin with her. And now, separate to the quest itself, if we look at the black box lore page from the book Duress and Egress, we'll learn that Anna has loaded the experimental exo chassis onto her evac ship at the tail end of the evacuation, and so it appears that Rasputin will indeed be housed in an exo frame at this point. As for their influence on the tower, immediately after the events of this season, we will have to wait and see, but the events at the end of this quest are going to be considered significant enough that it's listed as an end of season event, and so this is where we can earn the Calamity Protocol emblem. And from the various quest steps and the dialogue that we have there, Anna Bray saving Rasputin, loading him into an exo chassis, it raises the question over whether this event could compare in any way to what we saw with the Almighty crashing at the end of last season. Of course, that was a bit of an unexpected way to do things, and while we might not see something exactly the same, there's quite a lot of scope here for interesting cinematic content, potentially even gameplay/cinematic content, which is something we saw with the Almighty itself last season. So kind of hard to know what to expect on that front, but it'll definitely be very interesting. And then of course, after we've completed the quest, upon returning to Zavala, he's actually going to reward us with the Traveler's Chosen exotic sidearm. So this one's going to be very interesting because it's an exotic version of the basic sidearm from the opening campaign of Destiny 2, and the original is certainly nothing special. Although, if we look at it in the game right now, the scope on the weapon has actually been updated, so this has probably been updated universally for when we get the exotic version. And the exotic does see most of the stats on the weapon buffed, but importantly, we've got the new exotic bonus Gathering Light, so final blows with this weapon grants stacks of Gathering Light, and you can consume stacks, which grants you melee, grenade, and class ability energy based on the number of stacks. It has a secondary bonus Gift of the Traveler though, where each stack of Gathering Light improves this weapon's reload, handling, and target acquisition. And so the main question is, how are we going to consume the stacks of Gathering Light? Could it potentially be a hold to reload style thing where we literally trigger that consumption on demand? Or could it be related to reloading the weapon under normal conditions? Or maybe even emptying the mag instead of reloading? Of course, we're curious about that, but also just how potent will that Gathering Light bonus be? Because of course, with it granting melee, grenade, and class ability energy back, it does have the potential to be pretty strong. So with that synergizing with Gift of the Traveler, it could be a pretty fun weapon and be part of some pretty nice builds in the game. However, for now, that is pretty much everything that we know about the Evacuation quest itself, the reward, how that links to the end of the season, what appears to be a pretty interesting end of season event potentially. Because bear in mind, we weren't entirely clued up on the fact that we were going to see the Almighty crash across the tower courtyard. We suspected it based on some data mines, but I think the way in which Bungie did it wasn't entirely expected, so there's some scope there for a pretty interesting end of season event. The only thing we haven't really discussed right here would be the future of the interference missions, because of course, while at the moment we're just getting new dialogue and bits of lore every week, there are a couple of different variations that house some pretty interesting secrets, originally shared by JB3. There are also 4 more weeks of lore collectibles that we know of in the database for the missions, so maybe we're only going to see 4 more variants of it. However, it does seem likely that the events, maybe the premonitions or the things we see inside of the mission, and the feedback we're getting from Eris could actually trigger the evacuation phase itself at some point in the next few weeks. And so there are additional secrets there. But otherwise guys, let us know your thoughts on what we've spoken about in the video. Any opinions on the quest, speculation about the weapon, or precisely how the season is going to round up? I'd be curious to read about it below guys. We should also mention that the other major beat for this season is now going to happen in October with Festival of the Lost, so of course with the extended season, that'll now be happening before Beyond Light itself. And as always, I'll be sure to keep you posted about it. But if you're new to the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button so that I can keep you posted on the world of Destiny 2. We've got a few weeks of downtime, of course, before November, but we will be getting plenty of info, and there'll come a time where we've got a lot of content to discuss, and I'll be keeping you posted here on the channel, so stay tuned here if you want to. But otherwise, I appreciate you tuning in, and I hope you have an awesome day.